Die now." The ear-splitting, hateful scream echoed in the cold girl's bathroom at school. It didn't come from a criminal, but from the mouth of 10-year-old Tyler Kane, a boy with an angelic face but the devilish malice in his eyes. The curse was aimed directly at Emma Miller, who was cowering on the floor, her head throbbing after hitting the porcelain sink. To the witnesses, it was just a bullying incident that had gone too far. But they didn't know that the scream was more than just an insult. It was a gunshot, igniting a war no one had foreseen. It was the spark that lit the long-dormant flame of revenge within Emma's mother, Sarah Miller. And it would be the final indictment for an entire criminal empire, because when a mother hears her child cursed to die, the world will have to burn. The port city of Seafront welcomed Sarah Miller and her daughter with a salty breeze and the distinct dampness of the sea. It was nothing like their old, sun-drenched suburban home, where every corner and every step was haunted by David's laughter and presence. This place was unfamiliar, noisy, and somewhat cold. But for Sarah, that was exactly what she needed. A place far enough away for the past not to catch up, a place new enough for the two of them to start over. At least, that's what she told herself every morning as she looked in the mirror, trying to hide the dark circles under her eyes. Their small apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old brick building, with windows looking straight out onto the harbor. Giant container ships, towering like mobile skyscrapers, quietly sailed in and out, their horns occasionally letting out a long, mournful wail. The first scene in their new home was of Emma, her face pressed against the cold window pane, her blue eyes, exactly like her father's, staring blankly out at the sea. Her expression was sad and empty, as if her soul had drifted out to sea with those ships. Sarah gently walked over and wrapped her arms around her daughter's thin shoulders from behind. She could feel the slightest tremor in the child's body. "We'll be okay, my love," she whispered, her voice attempting to sound steady and reassuring. "This is a new beginning." Emma didn't reply, just nodded weakly, a nod that held no hope. Sarah knew her daughter was still consumed by grief. The death of David, ruled a tragic mountaineering accident, had stolen the light from her eyes, and now the responsibility of reigniting that flame belonged to her. But hell didn't wait for them 9 layers deep. It was right there at Emma's new school, a prestigious private school called North Bay Academy, where Sarah had poured all of her remaining savings in the hope of providing her daughter with the best environment possible. On the first day, Emma came home with her pristine white uniform stained with a large brown milk splat, like an ugly scar. She told her mother, her voice a barely audible whisper, that she had been sitting alone at lunch when a group of kids, led by a boy named Tyler Kane, walked past. Tyler had accidentally tripped, spilling his entire tray of chocolate milk on her. The worst part wasn't the dirty uniform, but the hoarse laughter of the group and the click from one of their phones. They filmed me," Emma said, tears welling up in her eyes. That evening, Sarah swallowed her anger, telling herself it was just a minor case of childish bullying. She washed the uniform, comforted her daughter, and hoped tomorrow would be different. But it wasn't. It was only worse. The following days were a series of sophisticated torments. Emma's favorite sneakers disappeared right before gym class, forcing her to sit alone on the bench, enduring mocking stares. Her locker was stuffed with crumpled paper and dark, rotting banana peels. Her books were scribbled with grotesque drawings and the words hillbilly and orphan. This time, Sarah couldn't stay silent. She left work early and went to see the principal, a portly man named Thompson with a perpetually fake smile. "Miss Miller, I'm very sorry about what happened," he said, his hands clasped over his belly, his voice monotonous like a machine. "I've spoken with young Mr. Kane. He said it was just a misunderstanding. Kids can be a bit mischievous sometimes." Mischievous? Sarah couldn't keep her composure. "My daughter is being terrorized, Mr. Principal. And it's all because of a group of students." Mr. Thompson's smile faded slightly. He leaned back in his chair, his tone changing. "Miss Miller, you should know that the Kane family are very generous benefactors of the Academy. Mr. Victor Kane sponsored our entire new library. We cannot jump to conclusions based solely on the words of a new student." Those words, cold and blatant, were like a bucket of ice water thrown in Sarah's face. She understood that justice here had a price, and she couldn't afford it. An invisible wall of power and money had been erected, and she and her daughter were on the outside. The bullying escalated to violence. That fateful afternoon, Sarah arrived to pick up her daughter and found Emma huddled in a corner of the schoolyard, her face pale, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. When she looked up, one side of her cheek was swollen and beginning to turn a purplish bruise. On the way home, Emma finally broke down. She recounted the story through choked sobs. Tyler's group had cornered her in the girls' bathroom. They surrounded her, shoving and taunting. It was Tyler himself, with a smug smile on his face, who pushed her hard. Emma lost her balance, and her head hit the edge of the stark white porcelain sink. A sharp pain shot through her, and her world spun. As she fell to the cold tiled floor, she only had time to hear Tyler's furious scream, a curse no child should ever have to hear. "Go die now." When they got home, Emma didn't say another word. She ran straight to her room, slammed the door, and locked it. Sarah stood frozen outside, listening to her daughter's heartbreaking sobs echoing from within. Helplessness and rage swirled in her chest like a storm. She had brought her here to find peace, but had only pushed her into a hell far worse. That night, after coaxing Emma to sleep with a mild sedative, Sarah found her daughter's diary under her pillow. She hesitated for a second, then opened it. Her hands trembled as she read the scrawled, tear-stained words, the words of a soul that was breaking. "If I disappear, maybe they'll stop laughing at me. I miss Dad. Dad wouldn't let anyone hurt me. Why did he leave me?" Sarah's heart felt as though it was being squeezed. She flipped to another page, where Emma had recorded a detail she had never mentioned. A few days earlier, Tyler had whispered a threat in her ear, right after she slipped during gym class. "My dad says your dad was a traitor. You should know your place and keep your mouth shut." Sarah read the sentence over and over again. Traitor. That wasn't a word a 10-year-old could come up with on their own. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a message. A warning from an adult passed through the mouth of a child. She walked over to the bed, looking at her daughter's tear-streaked face in her sleep. The curse, "Go die now," and the accusation, "traitor," echoed in her mind. The gentle, tired eyes of a widowed single mother, struggling with life, suddenly disappeared. In their place was a cold, focused, and deadly stare, the gaze of an intelligence officer who had once faced the world's most dangerous individuals, a cornered beast when its cub is threatened. She leaned down, kissed her daughter's warm forehead, and whispered an ironclad vow, a promise that would be fulfilled at all costs. "No one will ever hurt you again, I promise." From the next day on, their small apartment was no longer just a sanctuary. It had been transformed into a dojo, a war room, a fortress. Sarah woke up before dawn, not to the sound of an alarm clock, but to the smoldering fire of anger in her chest. She spent an hour practicing her old physical drills, push-ups, sit-ups, basic martial arts stances, until her muscles ached and her shirt was soaked with sweat. She needed to reclaim the feeling of her body, to turn it back into a weapon. After dropping Emma off at school, she no longer went to the used bookstore where she worked part-time. Instead, she sat in cafes near the harbor with a cheap laptop and a cup of black coffee. She was no longer Sarah Miller, the gentle widow. She had returned to being Sierra, her old code name. The skills she thought were buried under the ashes of a normal life now resurfaced powerfully. She hacked into public databases, searching for every piece of information on Victor Kane and his shipping empire. She tracked trucks, logged schedules, and photographed containers that were being transported at unusual hours. She discovered a pattern. Every Tuesday night, a few special containers, without clear identification codes, were secretly offloaded by a private security team, not the usual port employees. But her most important mission began every afternoon when Emma returned. She cleared the living room, creating an empty space. She laid an old yoga mat on the floor. "Today, we're going to learn how to fall, Emma," Sarah said, her voice no longer soothing but the command of a trainer. Emma looked at her mother with a puzzled expression. "Fall? That's right. Before you learn how to fight back, you have to learn how to take a hit, how to fall without getting hurt." She taught Emma how to curl her body, how to use her hands to absorb the impact. At first, Emma was timid and clumsy, but Sarah was patient. She didn't just teach technique, she taught the child psychology. "Harder, Emma. Fear only disappears when you face it. When someone pushes you, don't resist weakly. Go with their push, but turn that fall into your advantage. Gradually, She taught her the basics of self-defense. How to escape a grab by twisting the wrist at its weakest point. How to strike at vulnerable pressure points like the eyes, throat, and groin. Emma, from a girl who always bowed her head and avoided eye contact, began to hold her head high. In her eyes, the fear was slowly being replaced by a glimmer of confidence. In the midst of their lives changing so rapidly, a ghost from the past suddenly appeared, bringing both hope and danger. One evening, as the two of them were eating dinner, the doorbell rang. Sarah motioned for Emma to stay quiet, then she grabbed a paring knife and quietly walked to the door. Through the peephole, she saw a familiar but gaunt face. Ethan Cross, an old teammate, David's best friend. Her heart gave a jolt, a mix of relief and caution. She opened the door a crack, her hand still clutching the knife behind her back. Ethan looked a decade older than the last time she saw him at David's funeral. His eyes were sunken, tired, and full of worry. "Sarah," he said, his voice raspy, "I need to talk to you." "How did you find me?" Sarah asked, her voice cold. She no longer believed in coincidences. "David told me some things before he passed. It took me a long time to find you. I think you're in danger." Ethan looked nervously past her, into the apartment. He took a small key from his jacket pocket and placed it in Sarah's outstretched hand. "David asked me to give this to you if anything happened to him. It's the key to a private storage unit in the industrial park to the east. He said you'd know what to do." Sarah stared at the cold key in her palm, then looked into Ethan's eyes. She didn't see deception, but she didn't see complete trust either. Her instincts as a spy told her to be cautious. "Thank you," she said, and then she closed the door. The next day, she sent Emma to a trusted neighbor's house and drove alone to the industrial park. It was a row of old, rusted, and mostly abandoned warehouses. David's unit was at the end of the row, its metal door rusted. The key fit perfectly. Inside, the air was musty and thick with dust. David's belongings were neatly packed, mostly old keepsakes he didn't want to throw away. A few worn-out climbing clothes, a stack of books on military history, a couple of old photos of the two of them. Amidst the items, Sarah found a blue metal toolbox, the one David always carried with him on every trip. She opened it, revealing a collection of familiar tools, a hammer, pliers, screwdrivers, but when she lifted the foam lining at the bottom, she found a secret compartment. Inside, wrapped in a shock-absorbent velvet cloth, was a solid black portable hard drive. She brought it home, feeling as if she was holding a time bomb that could destroy everything. That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah sat in front of the computer, her heart pounding in her chest. She plugged in the hard drive. A window popped up, asking for a password and a dual biometric authentication. She tried every password she could think of. Birth dates, anniversaries, her name, Emma's name, their old code names. All of them failed. After dozens of attempts, the system locked itself for an hour. She felt like smashing the computer. The truth was right in front of her, but it was locked behind an impenetrable wall. In her desperation, her gaze accidentally fell on the pendant around Emma's neck, who was sleeping soundly in her room. The gift David had given her for her 7th birthday, a tiny silver star, sparkling under the nightlight. She suddenly remembered what David used to say to his daughter, a phrase he would always repeat whenever he tucked her into bed. "You're my brightest star." A glimmer of hope flickered. Sarah returned to the computer, typed "my brightest star" as the password. It still didn't work. She sighed, feeling foolish. Just then, Emma walked into the room, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Mom, I'm thirsty." Sarah was startled. She looked at her daughter, then at the computer's built-in microphone. A crazy, almost hopeless idea popped into her head. "Emma, my love," she said, trying to keep her voice as calm as possible. "Before you get some water, can you read a phrase for me? Read it clearly into here." She pointed to the microphone. Emma nodded, looking confused but still doing as she was told. She took a breath, leaned close to the microphone, and read clearly, her clear voice echoing in the quiet room. "My brightest star." A dry beep came from the computer. On the screen a message appeared. "Voice authentication successful." Sarah's heart stopped. The data opened. A series of folders appeared. Contracts, shipping schedules, bank accounts, the general. Sarah tremblingly clicked on a video. It was a clip of a secret exchange of metal suitcases on a ship, with Victor Kane present. She opened an email file. It contained encrypted messages exchanged between Kane and a person with the code name The General about transporting special goods. She saw one last folder, named Insurance. Inside was only a video file. With a terrible premonition, she clicked on it. David's face appeared. He looked tired and haggard, sitting in an unfamiliar hotel room. He looked straight into the camera, as if he was looking into her eyes. "Sarah," his voice trembled but was firm, "if you're seeing this video, it means I've failed. I discovered something terrible. Victor Kane, he's selling our nation's defense technology to our enemies. I've gathered enough evidence, but he knows. He's hunting me down." He took a deep breath, his eyes filled with pain and desperation. "Sarah, my death wasn't an accident. Victor Kane killed me. Protect Emma. Protect our brightest star." The video ended abruptly. Sarah was left in a state of shock. The computer screen reflected her face, pale and lifeless. The pain of losing her husband, the fear for her daughter, and the ultimate rage erupted all at once, incinerating everything inside her. The peaceful world she had tried to build had collapsed. Now, all that remained were ashes and a vow of vengeance. The night descended upon the port city of Seafront, but inside Sarah's small apartment, the light from the laptop screen still illuminated her focused face. The evidence on the hard drive was both a curse and a weapon. It confirmed her worst fears, but also gave her the power to seek revenge. However, she knew she couldn't act alone. She needed an ally, even if only a temporary one. She decided to contact Ethan. She needed his expertise to decipher some of the complex military documents, but her instincts told her to hold back her ace in the hole. She copied a portion of the data information about the shipping routes and a few partially decoded emails onto a separate USB drive. David's video and the most crucial financial evidence remained hidden. They met at a deserted late-night diner, the kind of place that only smelled of old grease and weak coffee. Ethan arrived, still with his perpetually weary look. "What did you find?" he asked immediately, without a word of greeting. Sarah pushed the laptop towards him. "This is a part of it. Disguised shipping contracts. Victor Kane is moving something more than just ordinary consumer goods." They leaned over the screen together, two shadows huddled under the yellow light. Ethan seemed very cooperative. He pointed to the military codes, explained their meaning, and analyzed the unusual sea routes Kane's ships had taken, routes that bypassed all international checkpoints. "He's creating a ghost corridor," Ethan muttered, his face grim, "a black silk road for weapons." But throughout their work, Sarah noticed he always evaded personal questions. When she casually asked, "How are your wife and kids doing these days?" Ethan just brushed her off with a vague "they're fine" before quickly changing the subject. Then, his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, a fleeting look of tension on his face, then quickly got up. "I have to go. Something urgent came up," he said, and went outside to take the call. Sarah watched through the glass window, seeing Ethan walk to a secluded corner, talking in a furtive manner. The suspicion in her heart flared up again. That suspicion wasn't just for Ethan. Emma's homeroom teacher, Miss Davis, a woman with a kind smile and a warm voice, began to make Sarah uneasy. At first, Sarah was grateful for her concern. But gradually, Miss Davis's questions became too inquisitive. "Are you and Emma going anywhere this weekend? I'm just asking in case there's a last-minute group project. Does Emma use the computer much at home these days? My son is always glued to the screen." Every question was cloaked in a guise of concern, but for a former intelligence officer, they were signs of information gathering. Sarah decided to verify. She bought a tiny listening device, shaped like a sparkling button, and pretended it was a small gift. "I thought it was pretty, so I bought it for you," she said, clipping it to Emma's backpack strap, "to make my daughter's bag look cuter." The next day, while sitting in the cafe, she connected her Bluetooth headset to her phone. She heard the noisy classroom, then Miss Davis calling Emma to the board. Everything seemed normal. But during lunch break, when Emma left her bag in the classroom to go outside and play, Sarah heard the classroom door creak open. Miss Davis's voice came through, low and hurried, speaking into the phone. "Yes, sir, same as before. The child is attending school normally, no strange behavior. The mother? I think she's still grieving. No suspicious actions at all. Yes, I'll continue to keep an eye on her." Sarah tightened her grip on the paper cup, hot coffee nearly spilling out. Her heart turned to ice. Even the school, which was supposed to be the safest place for her daughter, was part of the criminal network. Emma was being watched every day. She had to act faster. She needed to know which side Ethan was truly on. That night, she made a dangerous gamble. She called Ethan, her voice panicked and desperate. "Ethan, they know. Someone broke into my apartment when I was out. They turned everything upside down. I think the hard drive is gone. I have to get Emma out of here right now. We're catching the night train out of the city, the 11:30 train at the central station." It was a complete lie. Her apartment was safe. That night, instead of going to the train station, Sarah put on black clothes, pulled a baseball cap low over her face, and hid on a rooftop across from the station. From there, she could observe the entire entrance. At exactly 11 p.m., she saw Ethan arrive. He stood in a corner, constantly checking his watch, his face anxious. A few minutes later, two tall, burly men in black, whom Sarah recognized from photos she'd taken at the harbor, approached him. She saw Ethan say something to them, pointing toward the train schedule board. It was clear he was reporting information. Her heart sank. He had betrayed her. But just after the two men left, heading toward the waiting hall, Sarah saw Ethan retreat into a dark corner. He pulled out a second phone, a cheap, disposable one, and quickly typed a message. He bought it. "Prepare for Plan B." A glimmer of hope, fragile but bright, appeared. Plan B? What did that mean? The next day, Ethan contacted her proactively, arranging to meet at a secret location, an old pedestrian bridge over the industrial river, where the noise from the factory could drown out any listening devices. When Sarah arrived, Ethan was already there, leaning against the railing, looking down at the murky water. He looked even more haggard than before. "I know you saw everything last night," Ethan said, without beating around the bush. "Why, Ethan? Why did you do it?" Sarah asked, her voice both cold and full of the pain of betrayal. Ethan didn't turn around. He kept looking at the river. "Victor has my wife and daughter, Sarah. They're somewhere I don't know. He sends me pictures of them every day as a reminder. I was forced to work for him, to report your every move. Otherwise..." He choked up. He turned to face Sarah. For the first time, she clearly saw the desperation and agony in his eyes. "But I didn't betray you. I would never betray David. Every report I sent him was part of the plan. To make him believe I was loyal, to make him drop his guard." He handed Sarah a tablet. On the screen was a detailed schematic of Victor's luxury yacht, the Poseidon, and the schedule for a charity gala he was hosting over the weekend. The entire city's elite, politicians, and media would be there. "This is Plan B," Ethan said, his voice full of determination. "This is our only chance. To expose him to the entire world. He might kill one or two people, but he can't silence everyone." Sarah looked at the schematic, then into Ethan's eyes. She saw the internal conflict of a husband and a father pushed to the brink. She saw the resolve of a soldier who refused to surrender. She decided to trust him, to stake her life and her daughter's on this final hand. On the night of the gala, the yacht, the Poseidon, was anchored offshore like a sparkling artificial island, completely separated from the real world. The light from the crystal chandeliers inside shone out, illuminating the dark sea, creating a magnificent yet fake spectacle. The sound of smooth jazz, clinking champagne glasses, and social laughter echoed everywhere. The powerful guests, in their expensive outfits, mingled and chatted, completely unaware that they were standing on a stage that was about to turn into a battlefield. Sarah, in the black and white uniform of a waitress, her hair neatly tied up in a bun, her face lightly made up to hide her fatigue and tension, easily blended into the crowd. She moved gracefully, a tray of drinks in her hand, but her eyes constantly scanned every nook and cranny. She wasn't just looking for a target, she was memorizing the locations of the exits, the security cameras, the number of bodyguards, and the weapons they carried. Her every step was calculated. Ethan, in a sleek Tom Ford suit, played the role of an important guest. He calmly shook hands, chatted with business partners, but occasionally glanced at Sarah, signaling with the secret cues they had agreed upon beforehand. A slight nod meant safe. A touch of his hand to his tie meant caution, being watched. Their plan was simple but incredibly bold and dangerous. Sarah had to infiltrate the yacht's central control room, the most heavily guarded area, connect the hard drive to the main system, and broadcast all the evidence onto all the large screens set up throughout the venue. But Victor Kane was a cunning old fox. a man who was always one step ahead. He had not fully trusted Ethan. His contingency plan had already been activated. Just as Sarah and Ethan boarded the yacht, a black car pulled up in front of the neighbor's house where Emma was staying. Miss Davis, Emma's teacher, opened the door, smiled, and said, "Emma, someone from your parents is here to take you to a surprise party." Emma, unsuspecting and innocent, followed her. Now, the little girl was locked in a luxurious but fortified cabin on the lower deck of the yacht. The room had a window looking out at the pitch-black sea, but the steel door was locked from the outside. The person guarding her was none other than Tyler Kane. "See?" Tyler said, lounging in an armchair, a smug look on his face. "I told you. My dad's the king here, and your mum's just a cockroach about to get crushed." Meanwhile, on the upper deck, Sarah received an encrypted message from Ethan. "He has the girl. Plan changed. Go now." Sarah's heart felt as though it was being squeezed, but her face didn't betray any emotion. She knew there was no turning back now. She nodded at Ethan from a distance, signaling that she understood. She put the tray down and, like a ghost, slipped through the crowd, heading toward the corridor leading to the technical area. She neutralized a guard with a lightning-fast strike to the back of the neck, dragging him into a storage room. She took his security card and swiped through 2 layers of controlled doors. The central control room appeared before her, brightly lit with dozens of screens and control panels. A technician was sitting there, engrossed in a screen. Sarah approached from behind, using a chloroform-soaked cloth to cover his mouth. The technician only struggled for a few seconds before collapsing. Sarah tremblingly plugged the hard drive into the system. Lines of code appeared. She typed as fast as the wind. Just a few more seconds. On the main deck, Victor Kane had just stepped onto the stage, a glass of champagne in his hand, beginning his speech about philanthropy and social responsibility. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice sounding hearty, echoing through the speakers. "We are here tonight not only to celebrate, but also to contribute to a better future." Suddenly, all the large screens behind him, which had been displaying the Kane Shipping logo, went black. Then they all lit up at once. The tired but resolute face of David Miller appeared, looking directly at the crowd. "Sarah, if you're seeing this video, it means I've failed. Victor Kane killed me." A deadly silence fell over the party. Then screams and chaos erupted. Videos of the weapons deals, email transcripts, and Swiss bank accounts were shown one after another, irrefutably. Victor Kane's face went pale. Then rage erupted, transforming his elegant face into a devilish mask. He roared into his walkie-talkie at his bodyguards. "Find that bitch and kill her. Kill them all. Don't let anyone get out of here alive." Gunfire erupted. The deafening shots tore through the smooth jazz music. The gala turned into a battlefield. Ethan pulled the gun hidden in his jacket and rushed to Sarah's side, who had just exited the control room. "Go find Emma. I'll hold them off," Ethan yelled, shooting down 2 bodyguards who were closing in. They fought and retreated through the chaotic corridors. When they were cornered at a junction, with the exit to the back deck in front of them and the henchmen closing in behind, Ethan pushed Sarah hard toward the exit. "Go, Sarah. For David. For the little girl." He turned back, facing the hail of bullets alone. "Tell my wife and kids I love them," were his last words before he fell. At the same time, in the cabin, Tyler heard the gunshots and the commotion outside. He laughed maliciously. "Hear that? Your mum's about to die. You'll be just like your dad. You traitor's brat." But Emma was no longer the scared little girl she used to be. Tyler's words no longer made her cry. They only ignited a fire of rage. She remembered her mother's lessons, remembered the painful training sessions. She feigned fear, retreated, and stumbled. When a smug Tyler approached, intending to grab her hair, Emma used all her strength, delivering a powerful kick to his groin. Tyler let out an indescribable shriek of pain, grabbing his privates and collapsing, writhing on the wet floor. Emma didn't run. She knew the door was locked. Her eyes quickly scanned the room and landed on the red fire alarm panel on the wall. Without a moment's hesitation, she climbed onto a chair and pulled the lever with both hands. The blaring fire alarm rang out. The automatic sprinkler system on the ceiling activated, pouring down like artificial rain, causing total chaos throughout the yacht. In the midst of it all, in the corridor, a burly henchman of Victor's was holding a gun to Sarah's head. He was savoring the moment of victory. "It's over, bitch." The blaring alarm and the cold, sudden water made him lose focus for a second, just enough to glance up at the ceiling. That 1 second was enough. Sarah spun around, her elbow striking his Adam's apple. He choked, loosening his grip on the gun. She twisted his wrist, snatched the gun, and shot him in the knee. He collapsed. She ran to find her daughter, charging through the waterlogged and chaotic corridors. She found the right cabin, the door already busted open from the outside. Inside, she saw Emma standing firm, beside Tyler, who was sprawled on the soaked floor. "Mom, Emma." The mother and daughter rushed into each other's arms. In the middle of the blaring alarm and the cold water, a brief moment of peace in the eye of the storm. The water from the sprinkler system was still pouring down, cold and relentless, mingling with the blaring alarm, creating a symphony of chaos. Sarah held Emma tight, feeling the warmth and the tremor of her child. The brief moment of reunion was cut short by the sound of heavy footsteps sloshing in the water behind them. She spun around, pulling Emma behind her, the gun still clutched in her hand, ready to fire. Victor Kane stood at the end of the corridor, his clothes soaked, his neatly combed silver hair now plastered to his head in a pathetic mess. His usual elegant face was gone, replaced by a mad, distorted expression of anger and defeat. In his hand was a shiny pistol, aimed directly at them. "This is all your fault," he roared, his voice hoarse and raw, overpowering the alarm. "You and your little brat. I should have killed both of you along with your idiot husband." "It's over, Victor," Sarah said, her voice eerily calm. The fear had completely disappeared, replaced by a cold serenity. "You've lost." "Lost?" Victor laughed maniacally. "I might have lost, but I'm taking you and your daughter with me to hell." He raised his gun, aiming it at Emma, but just then, another, louder sound drowned out all the noise. The roar of a helicopter engine directly above them. An extremely bright beam of light from a searchlight shone down, piercing through the windows of the corridor, making Victor squint. At the same time, from all directions, the sirens of police and Coast Guard boats blared, getting closer and closer, tightening the noose around the floating island of crime. Victor's face turned ashen. He knew he was surrounded. The data had been successfully sent before the system was cut. The outside world knew. "No!" he screamed, a desperate cry. He turned his gun towards Sarah, intending to fire one last shot. But Sarah was faster. A dry bang rang out. Her bullet hit Victor's gun-wielding shoulder. He shrieked, the gun clattering to the wet floor. Special forces from the helicopter rappelled down, storming in from both ends of the corridor, the red laser dots from their rifles simultaneously shining on Victor's chest. He stood there, stunned, holding his bleeding shoulder, finally realizing the truth. His empire had collapsed. Justice, though delayed, had finally arrived. Victor Kane and his entire crew were arrested. The conspiracy to smuggle national defense technology was exposed, causing a political and military shockwave across the entire country. The shadowy, high-ranking general was also brought to light. The honor of David Miller, a silent hero who sacrificed himself for his country, was restored in a solemn ceremony that Sarah and Emma only watched on television. Ethan's family was rescued safely from a secluded house. A few days later, before they were placed in the witness protection program, Sarah went to see them. She didn't say much, just hugged Ethan's wife, a hug that said 1,000 words. She used her rights as a key witness to ensure that a large reward from Victor's confiscated assets would be transferred to them as a debt of gratitude, a small legacy from the sacrifice of a brave man. A few months later, another city, another beach, bright golden sunlight, lapping waves, and the laughter of children. Sarah sat on the warm sand, wearing sunglasses, quietly watching her daughter. Emma, in a light blue summer dress, was no longer the timid, frightened girl she once was. Her golden hair blew in the wind, and her skin was a healthy tan. She no longer walked with her shoulders hunched, but with a confident stride. She saw her daughter playing with a new friend. After a while, a group of older kids came by, deliberately kicking over the two girls' sandcastle and teasing the other girl. The girl was scared, on the verge of tears. Emma didn't back down. She stepped up, stood in front of her friend, held her head high, and said something to the bullies. Sarah was too far away to hear, but she could see the determination in her daughter's stance. The kids looked at each other, seemed surprised, and then quietly left. Emma turned back, held out her hand to her new friend, and together they happily rebuilt another sandcastle, even bigger and more beautiful than before. Sarah smiled, a real, peaceful smile. For the first time in many years, Emma ran back to her mother, plopping down beside her, covered in sand. She leaned her head on Sarah's shoulder. "Where are we going next, Mom?" the little girl asked, her eyes sparkling with joy and curiosity about the future. Sarah took off her sunglasses, turned, and looked at her daughter. She knelt down on the sand, bringing her eyes to her daughter's level. She looked deep into those clear blue eyes, eyes that no longer held fear but shone with resilience and a wisdom beyond her years. "Wherever you want, my brightest star," she said, her voice gentle but full of certainty. "We don't have to run anymore." The mother and daughter looked together toward the sunset that was painting a corner of the sky red, as the white-crested waves washed ashore one after another before retreating back into the great sea. They were not just survivors of a tragedy, they were warriors who had found their own peace after bravely walking through the eye of the storm.